Well, us Aussies might sometimes have a bit of a chip on our shoulders about church, but I think when we read the scriptures, we're not in too bad company. There was an incident that is recorded in the Gospels where Jesus was going to what functionally was the church of his time, the temple. And the incident is, well, quite shocking and somewhat surprising when we see how passionately Jesus responded to some stuff that was going on there. Have a look at this story. Matthew chapter 21, verses 12 and 13. Jesus entered the temple courts and drove out all who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. "It is written," he said to them, "My house will be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers."
Why would they be selling animals in the temple? Well, the idea was you needed an animal to be able to sacrifice. That was the provisions in the Old Testament for atonement for sin, and a whole load of other offerings is that you would sacrifice an animal. It's very hard to carry an animal with you if you don't live locally. You might be coming from Galilee in the north, a few days' journey. You might be coming from somewhere else in the empire, and it's just not practical to be able to bring your animal with you. And so kind of like the candy bar or the popcorn being sold in the foyer of a movie, they're conveniently there on the way in where you can buy your sacrifice at the last minute. The problem was, a bit like movies, they do try to rip you off in that they charge an exorbitant price for something which really shouldn't cost that much. And so people were making money out of the sacrificial animals, which goes contrary to the way God wanted things to be set up. And so his temple, rather than being a place of worship and a place of prayer, as Jesus quotes the Old Testament there, it was turning into a den of robbers where people were making money out of the inconvenience of others. They were also changing money. There was a certain type of currency which you had to use in order to pay the temple tax, which was not the Roman money that everyone would have had. And so that special temple money, people were again making money off exchange rates. Again, nothing much has changed in 2,000 years.
So we see Jesus walking in, seeing around him in the temple courts people selling animals and exchanging money so that people from far off places can come to worship. In one way, it doesn't sound too bad. So I wonder why Jesus acted so aggressively and passionately about what was happening in what was functionally the church of his day.
So why is Jesus angry at this? Well, obviously he doesn't want people to be exploiting others in the temple when it's supposed to be God's house. It's supposed to be a house of prayer. And that's the bit from the Old Testament that Jesus quotes about my house shall be a house of prayer. That's how it runs in Matthew's Gospel. In Mark's Gospel, the quote goes for a little longer, where it says, my house should be a house of prayer for all nations. And one of the other things that was happening, as well as exploiting others, there was a barrier set up in the temple to exclude Gentiles from coming in where they were allowed to, according to God's provision. There'd been an extra barrier there to keep the Gentiles out. And so, as well as being angry that people are exploiting others, he's also angry that the Gentiles weren't allowed to come and worship as well. And that was one of the things that Jerusalem was supposed to be, not just where Israel worshipped God, but where anyone throughout the world, no matter what their background was, if they wanted to join Israel's God, they could do so, and they were being excluded. So they're the two things that Jesus is angry about.
Well, Aussies in the early days of the colony probably had really good reason after they finished their sentence to walk out of the church and never come back again. I think if I was one of them, I probably would have done the same thing. And for the church in Australia since that time, there's probably been oft deserved reasons for people ever since to walk out of churches and never come back. But does that mean that we as Christians should give up on it, or be embarrassed about it, or be equally as critical and judgmental from the inside of it? Well, according to the New Testament, we can't live without it. We are to continue to meet together as the end of days approaches. We are gathered together as a community with a mission. We are centered around a task that God has given us. And so, I guess a little bit like Jesus clearing the temple, we need to remind people and ourselves what the mission is all about. For Jesus, it wasn't about making money or making a profit or actually effectively keeping people of lesser means from worshipping God. And for us today, we need to similarly grasp Jesus' passion, recapture the mission of the Church of God in Australia today, and to be part of the solution of the greatest need that our friends and our family members, our neighbours have. Rather than walking out and not returning, our mission is to gather together as a community around the task that God has set for us. We are to be light in the darkness. We are to be love in an uncaring world. We are to demonstrate by our words and our actions that God is King of this universe and that there is hope for people who are lost. Perhaps like Jesus, we need to recapture some passion to make sure that church is what it intended to be. We don't need probably to attack one another in the foyer of the church, but with equal passion that Jesus had for the real intention of what his temple should have been, we should have equal passion that our church, that the church in Australia, should be the example that God wants it to be, that should be centered around the mission that he has for us. Well, now it's time to go into your groups and to discuss some of the implications of the meaning and the place of the church for those of us with fair Dinkum faith.